Okay, so once again, good morning, and to this morning's class. That's is it the second week or the third week? I think the third week. Uh, Today we're actually going to look at, you know, political communication effect, or what is also called the campaign effect. We want to discuss, the kind of, implications that, political communication, or to narrowly put it, political campaigns actually have, and by that it means that what are the objectives that those who actually engage in political campaigns or political communications, tend to achieve. What do they tend to achieve, or what is the objective, of the campaigns? Now, I'm sure that we have all lived in a political campaign, or political communication broadly. So we can actually talk about, what we think the effects are, or what we think, the implications for the campaigns were, in terms of, citizens' engagement, in terms of the political parties or political communications engagement, in terms of the media engagement, in terms of the so many other things that we actually observed, or lived in the last election. We are actually blessed to have lived one live, what do you call, campaign, just recent elections, and we're still actually living it. Obviously, we have the court case going on, and I have actually said that it will be interesting for political communication students to actually follow the court case. How many of you are following the court case?
Me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But not really. Not really. I
Not
don't have
really.
time. Really? Yeah.
And that's when is
And
in.
that's when is in. So sometimes I miss the programs or like the sections, so I
Yeah.
don't really follow like consistent.
Okay, but do you catch up later on?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Who else is actually following? I'm not saying. I mean, just pin your entire life on it, but at least following what is going on and trying to understand some few things. And those of you following, you would realize that indeed the campaign has not ended, isn't it? People are trying to persuade people, or persuade the citizenry or Ghanaians to sort of appreciate, or to be convinced by their case in court. So you see the two parties, after each of the court cases, they come out, hold a press conference, etc. So you can even appreciate that we're still in the campaign. We haven't actually ended it yet. Anyway, so we're looking at what we call the campaign effect, or the political communication effect. Now, before we come to that, who can actually explain what effect mean? What does effect mean? When we say effect, what do we mean? When we say effect, what do we mean? Yeah? Anyone? Lift up your hand. Anyone, when we say effect, what do we mean? Guys, I'm listening. Okay, Sarah. Sarah, you're on mute. Unmute yourself and say.
Good morning, sir. I think it's an impact that is created on someone based on a situation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so you're right. So we're talking about the impact that is caused by something, the impact that is caused by something. So there is the cause and effect. or there's a preceding, kind of activity before that phenomenon happens. So that's exactly what Sarah has actually explained. So when we talk about the campaign effect, essentially we're looking at when the communication has been put forward. Yeah, so you can say results. Okay, Deborah also come out to say that you can actually talk about the results of an activity. Obviously, that's true. So if an
Sorry, my
activity,
line went off.
that's all right, Sarah. Yeah, do you want to come again? Or are you okay? All right. So we're talking about, the result of an activity when something is actually put in motion. The outcome of it is what we're talking about, the effect, of political communication or campaign. And so when you look into the definition, some people actually are defining a campaign that a campaign, or what is a campaign, and one is an effect, a campaign effect. We can actually look at that, and we're going to look at the boundaries of political campaigning, and we're going to look at the a definition of the campaign effect. How do campaigns affect the factors relevant to vote choice and vote choice itself? And then campaigns and democratic theory. We'll look at that. So before we get into the slides itself, can someone tell me how, the campaign that just happened, the election campaign, whether they followed it, and what are some of the key things that they took out, or some of the key things that actually struck them? Yeah. I'm sure a lot of you, or all of us, actually lived through the campaign. What are some of the key things that actually struck you? Yeah, I'm listening to you guys. What are some of the key things that actually struck you? Yeah, Anna.
So please, how the message of their campaign was put across.
Yeah, but what actually struck you? What was very, kind of defining for you? Cassandra. Cassandra, yes?
Legalization of Okada.
Okay, Cassandra, you were in karaoke
The
mode.
legalization of Okada.
The legalization of Okada. Did you say the legalization of Okada? Okay, that struck you. Now, how did it strike
Yes.
you? How did it strike you? Can you put a lot of some emphasis on it? How did it strike you? Or what was striking about it?
So yes. So the NDC looking at the fact that most of the youth are into Okada business, and that's what most of the young the youth in the northern region use as a means of income. So the NDC decided to come up with that, legalizing it to gain more.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Please, did you hear what I said?
Yeah, the end part we didn't hear. So just say the end part.
So I said that the NDC decided to come up with that policy, the legalization of Okada, to gain more votes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that actually strike you, Okay, that actually struck you. Okay, that's
yes.
All right, thank you. Gifty.
Sir.
Yeah, Gifty.
What struck me was the songs, the campaign songs.
Okay.
It was quite
my honey.
Say it again.
Yes, and also some of the message. It seems One thing that stood out, one party was saying, I've done this more than this, and the other party was saying the same thing. So basically, they were saying the same thing in different ways. That's what stood out.
Okay, excellent. That's what stood out for you. Excellent. Thank you. So they were saying the same thing, but in different ways. All right, thank you. Tracy,
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
good morning.
What always stands out for me in campaigns, including these ones, are the way they are able to amass the crowd,
Mhm.
and the fire of charisma that is sort of sparked in them. Like they are so charismatic in whoever is about to speak to them. Yeah, that's what always stands out for me.
Okay, thank you. Evelyn.
Sir,
Mhm.
sir, what was actually intriguing for me was the fact that a political party will bring out their campaign message, and we the electorate or the political followers will make fun of it and try to ridicule that political party and all that. I was just enjoying that aspect
That's good.
because I couldn't stop laughing.
Okay.
For
Good.
example, on Dramani Mohammed's political message, as in Ghanaians derived a song from it, like the Mahani and Okada, those things. It was quite funny for me, so I kept laughing all along. Yeah.
Okay, great. Che, sorry, Priscilla, yeah, Priscilla Kosi.
Yes. So this election, what struck me was the effective use of social media, especially Twitter. You realize that each and now and then you see hashtag NDC must win and MPP. You understand it has never happened before. Actually, this is my first time witnessing it.
Yeah.
And also there was so much fun, from music to your policies and this particular say your tones. So you understand the whole political scene became very, very comic.
Excellent.
And I realized that what also struck me was, now I think Ghanaians are thinking it doesn't necessarily mean the political party that you follow, but if you are not working, won't vote for you. I realized one thing too, that now the minority parties, they are also getting votes, because I wasn't expecting somebody like Goom to amount that kind of vote, but he got some certain percentage of votes, and that really struck me.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah, Julius.
All right, Doc, thank you very much. What also really caught my attention was the way the people, the citizens, also took to the streets and started voting for their various political parties. I was so marveled at that, because they were actually playing an active political role. They were going around convincing people to vote for.
You mean the youth,
their
right?
political party. Yes, please, the youth. Let me put it that way, the youth. Yeah, so that really caught my attention, and it was so, something new about this.
Excellent. So all those things that we've talked about, okay, Rabero, before I come back. Yeah.
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Morning.
What caught my attention was the time period that the campaign itself was going on. It wasn't like there wasn't any more COVID around, but there were people struck to the street all over during this pandemic period, and the campaign was going on. And also there was this I noticed, which is the campaign days.
The what?
It really happened during the days the campaign, the days the campaigns and the rallies went on.
Yeah.
They were really weekdays, like Mondays to Friday.
Yeah.
And then when you watch the number of people, or when you see the number of people who were attending these rallies, you have to ask yourself, you are going to stand out on the sun, or even in, let me say, in the parks, for these people who promise you job every 4 years, but they don't do it. And there you are during the week where you should be working, but then you are not working and you are going to stand in the sun for these same people to come promise you job.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just putting my mind to it and I couldn't
Okay.
figure out why like it
Why
happened
did
like
you do
that.
that?
So that was what struck me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excellent. So all those things that were striking for us, all right, is actually what we are talking about now. That political communication have a certain effect, all right, and just as was actually put, correctly by some of you, the campaign itself has a comic effect. Do you get it? Now it makes people actually laugh. It makes people. It brings some fun. It brings some, some kind of soft part of the entire political process. Politics is one of the hard, what do you call, news that we talk about. I mean, when you're dealing with politics, it's about hard issues. It's about a very a sensitive topics or very difficult, complex issues. But the campaign has a certain way of lightening up the political issues that we're talking about. So it has that particular comic effect. But campaign also has a fear effect. It has an effect to put fear in people, and that's what sometimes political campaigners or the proponent of the campaign would want to seek. How they could put fear in people in order that they can change their behavior. So you realize that in the whole campaign process, you could talk about at least two sum up effects that the campaign actually has. You're looking at the behavioral effect that it would cause people to actually change, course or to actually do something, or it would actually provide them with some sort of information, education. It would persuade, so many other things. So all those things that we're actually discussing here, that's what we're talking about. What does the campaign seek to achieve? What does the campaign seek on the listeners or the audience, for example? But of course, it is not only one-sided. When you look at a campaign, just like Ryberry just pointed out, what made people come out in droves, stand in, go into the sun, and which in this time we didn't really have the massive, outdoor campaigns, but there were kind of features of it. What would make people actually get into the sun to push for their political party? And as rightly said by Julius too, you see young people, which had never happened before, but you see young people drive out, go into the spaces to stamp for their parties, to canvass for their parties, in order that people actually join. So the campaign has a way of creating a relationship effect, has a way of sometimes dismissing issues. If you take the pandemic, for example, and the way the political parties actually, pushed into the society, into the communities as though there was no pandemic. That's a very dismissive, kind of attitude, as if there was nothing, called, a pandemic in the society that was not infectious. Meanwhile, it did exist. So that behavior itself brought a lot of disbelief that indeed, the pandemic was here. Obviously, if it was here, they would put on masks, etc. But people didn't. And that was a very, very serious issue. So you realize that the campaign has a tendency to actually cause, behavioral changes, to actually cause attitudinal, changes or attitudinal results, or to actually pass on information. That's what we're actually looking at, which means that whenever you are about to set up your campaign, you have to, or you must ask yourself, what effect do you seek to achieve, with this campaign, right from the, parties involved in the campaign, down to, everyone else. So you are asking yourself, what effect do you seek to achieve, in the campaign? And that is establishing one, the objective of the campaign. And by that doing also, you're establishing the perimeters or the kind of input, the activities that must go into the campaign. Because you cannot actually go into campaign without having to define the perimeters. the objectives, the inputs, i.e., how you're going to prosecute the campaign. And how you're going to prosecute the campaign is dependent on the objectives or the effect that or the results that you seek to achieve, from the campaign. I hope it's clear. I hope it's clear.
Yes, sir.
Thank
Yes, sir.
you. Any questions or contributions? Okay, so if we look at the what is political campaign now, to define political campaign or to actually explain political campaign is to identify the key entities or the key parties involved in a campaign. All right, so usually in a political campaign is focused on these three. All right, you have the party, the candidate, and the policy or the program. All right, no campaign goes on without the identification of these three parties. All right, but that is certainly not enough. Who can tell me the limitation of this particular, definition of a campaign, political campaign being focused on these three? Rabel.
Sir.
Yeah.
Sir.
Yeah, Evelyn, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think one limitation about the elements you've given out there is that it didn't voice out the objective of the political campaign.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I think with every classic definition for a political campaign should have the objective, and then it should be manned by political actors aiming at influencing the decision making of political followers or electorates.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so perhaps we can actually put the objective in the middle, all right, as the defining point. So you're talking about the objectives for party candidate and the policy. Good point. Ribeiro.
Okay, sir. If I was making this table, I would add the audience.
Yeah.
And then the channel. So I think that is what is missing.
Fantastic. So you can actually add the voters and the audience, and then of course the channel of communication. Fantastic point. So add this, Rachel.
Okay, sir. We should also add the message because the audience are there to hear something. So, what is the message you're going to give them? So, you should also focus on the message that you're going to give to the audience.
Great point. Exactly. So we can add a message to it. Yes. Julius, your hand was up.
Yes, sir. I had wanted to speak on the party, but I saw it.
Okay.
But let me quickly see if this will come in there. Jurisdiction. I mean, the particular town. I think it's also
fantastic. Yeah, because we couldn't actually say that all campaigns are national, right? There are some campaigns that are local. Obviously, parliamentary campaigns are not of national character. They are local, all right. And obviously, if you look at that and then you differentiate that from the campaign of, let's say, district assemblies or, the what you call assemblymen, certainly that is also within a particular jurisdiction, isn't it? So fantastic. You also have to define the area, the jurisdiction that the campaign is taking place. So yes, we've had all these understanding that when you talk about political campaign, all these elements must be in your definition. All right. So you're planning a campaign and you have to identify these key elements: the candidate, policy, party. What is the objective for the campaign? What message? And you say messaging is about a summation of your entire agenda into one. And usually when we talk about messaging, we have two ways. We have what we call the broadcast and narrowcast messaging, all right? Broadcast being the summation of it, and then the narrowcast being the breaking down of your entire message into policy bits, in order that it can touch the various defined, audiences that you're actually looking to target. Julius.
Yes, Doc, please, I'm not clear on the differences between the policy and then the message. So
okay, so usually, when we say policy, obviously we're talking about the programs that you intend to execute, when in government. So, for example, you're talking about free SHS. You're talking about what do you call the free primary health care, for example, right? You're talking about Okada, for example. But that is policies, and that's the bits and perhaps of the things that you want to achieve in government. But when it comes to messaging, you are actually summing up the entire campaign in one, simplified, sentence that could resonate with people immediately. So without even having explained your policies to them, the messaging must actually attract or compel someone to listen to you. Are you with me?
Yes,
So that's why you hear political parties say, one Ghana agenda, or what do you call the NDC's was what? What was the NDC's campaign message this last time?
The big push, I think.
The big push was the policy, but I think they had what do you call manifesto? That manifesto's name, the name that was on the manifesto.
The People's Manifesto.
Yeah, and they says something jobs, whatever for all. So what did they say?
The rescue mission or
Yeah, okay. So let's take the rescue mission, for example. All right. So the rescue mission is the summation of what they seek to achieve, isn't it? That they were going to, as if Ghanaians were under bondage, all right? So they were going to rescue Ghanaians. So the rescue mission is the message, all right? And then the various policies under the rescue mission should actually tie up. So they're talking about free primary health care. They're talking about Kadai. They're talking about all those things as, amplifying or as things that is actually explaining the rescue mission. Are you with me? And then the MPP's message was what? What was the MPP's message?
Four more for Nana, four more to do more.
One more to do more. So that was also, the message that they put out. And then underneath that were their, various sub policies that they actually articulate. So usually the messaging is the overarching, kind of what do you call position, the overarching position. Call it, the brand promise, or the proposition that they give to the people, and then underneath that are the various, what do you call, policy, positions. All right, great, thank you. So we go on to say, so we look at the things that the focus of the campaign, political campaign. Again, as we said, obviously the party. So we're looking at the party's identity, the party's credibility. We're looking at the profile, the organizations, the mobilization, the campaigning ability. So when you take the party, for example, and we're defining the campaign, you know that these are the ingredients that actually go into the campaign on the party. So what must you talk about when you take the party? You're talking about its identity. Now, in most cases, we have tend to reduce the party's identity to geographical boundaries, all right? And that's quite unfortunate. I think it's because the political parties themselves haven't done a good job. They haven't done a good job in articulating what the identity of the parties are to individuals. So when somebody says CPP, what does that mean? Do you get it? In terms of identity, when you say CPP, what does that mean? No. Now, obviously, you couldn't actually take out the formation of a political party, from perhaps a particular jurisdiction or a particular location, for example. It essentially could be that it's part of it, especially when that particular area, was very, what do you call, critical in its formation. All right. So we have parties that have geographical identities, globally. Sometimes it's because perhaps the bulk of the people that actually began that political party, and political parties are formed as a result of some social concerns. All right. And I'm sure Dominic probably had actually explained to you how political parties formed, from the beginning of the lecture. But I would also give you a little bit of a insight. Now, if you take, for example, the identity of the political parties being the left and the right, I'm sure you guys know what we mean by left and right, right? Hello?
No, please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay. So some of you know, when we say that a political party is a left party or a political party is a right party, we're talking about the ideologies. You know, the ideologies are defined in continuum. All right. So we're talking about position of the party on the ideological continuum. All right. So we're saying that okay. So on the left of the ideological continuum, you know, that party that actually sits there or represent the left, and then the right. So we'll talk about the right of center and the left of center. Then we're talking about when parties actually position, you know, what we call centric, you know, kind of a position. Now, most political parties of left and right have actually redefined themselves, all right, to include a what we call a centrist position. Yeah, Anastasia.
Yeah, it's like you're moving fast. The political party, like the right and left, you moved fast. So I didn't get it.
Okay. So when we say that a political party is left or is right, we're talking about their position on the ideological scale. All right. So when we say ideological scale, we're talking about the belief systems, you know, that actually govern political activity. And in political studies, uh, every party has a certain belief set or belief systems. All right. For example, if you take how do we solve the problem of a problem of education, all right, or unemployment. Now that is an issue, but that issue in political studies, every political party has a way of solving a particular issue, all right? The perspectives. Now, you can't say that there's only one way of solving a social issue. So we say that, okay, this issue of unemployment, how do we solve it? One of the parties will say that, okay, to solve unemployment, the state, you know, must create jobs, all right? The state must create jobs. So the state must, you know, put out factories, and then get people employed in it. As simple as that. All right. Another party will say that no, to create jobs or to solve unemployment, you don't need a state. You need people who have the ability to create jobs, to employ people. All right. So that's another perspective for solving the same kind of a problem. So the one the when we talk about party identity or ideological identity, the one who says that in creating jobs, the state must build companies, all right, and employ people because it's the state's responsibility. That individual is called the left, all right, because the definition of the left parties are those who actually propose that it is always the state's responsibility to make things happen, all right, and so the state must act, on that responsibility. Now, for those who think that, of course, it's the responsibility of the state to make sure that people are employed, but it doesn't actually mean that the state must be the employer. So they would actually propose that people must be empowered to set up jobs in order that they can actually recruit people to work. And that person is called the right, all right? So we have the left and the right, as an ideological position. Now, I'll let Evelyn come in and I'll tell you the beginning of that. Evelyn, come in.
Yeah, sir, please, based on what you said, can one actually say that then a political or a party identity is, when we say a party is capitalist and socialist?
That's correct. So the one who's actually saying that the state must empower people to create jobs so that they will employ other people are the ones that we call capitalist, all right? And the one that is saying that, no, the state should actually set up the jobs and get people to, to work in it, because if you give the people or other people mandates to do, it may not translate into job creation. They may get the money and then they may spend it by themselves or they enjoy it themselves. They are called socialists, all right, or socialism, or they call it social democracy. So these two, individuals are what we call the left and the right. Now, the beginning of it was in the French, what do you call, society, when the French Revolution, all right, where we have the peasants, and then of course we have the owners of capital, all right. When we say owners of capital, people who had money, the rich people, all right, in society. So we call them owners of capital because they own lands, all right, and they owned capital, that is money. And of course, the peasants were the ones who had labor. So of course, they were the ones who were, being plowing, being used to plow the lands, etc. Now, the peasants were disgruntled that those owners of capital, those their masters, so to speak, were, being what do you call, were cheating them. All right, they thought that they were not giving their due of their labor, so they spend so many hours, they get very little. All right, now the masters or the owners of capital also thought that the peasants do not, what do you call, they were not due for what they were asking for because they were not putting in a lot. All right. So you have two sides. One saying, I've employed you to do this, but I don't think you're putting in enough effort for me to pay you that much. So I'll pay you commensurate to what you've done. And the other one is saying, no, you are cheating us. You're not giving us our due value, etc. So that pitching, all right, meant that they had to resolve it. So in that situation, that is what is called parliament now. Those of the masters, those of the capital, seated at the right, and those peasants, or the workers, they were seated at the left. All right. So that's where you have the left and right, theories when you actually read political studies. The beginning of some of these ideological positions. So eventually, everybody who identified with the peasants, i.e., your family is the labor, your people, and they lived in community houses, etc. They were always of the left, and those who lived or who were associated with, the masters, i.e., the rich people, were of the right. So it defined the way they lived, and it defined the way they, what do you call, engaged in community. So when you go to the communities, the working class actually lived in a certain place, and then the so-called, the masters of capital or the owners of capital, the rich people, simply speaking, also lived at a certain place. All right. Over time, that ideological positions, kind of evolve. All right, and other things come in, other social issues. So from the beginning of work, now issues like, sexuality, gender, they form or they become ideologically aligned. All right. So a typical example of modern day, left and right debate that actually aligns that is sexuality. All right. So those who actually belong to the left are called progressives. All right. They think that society must progress, from time to time. And so new values or new culture actually emerge. And one of them is sexuality, all right? That we're not bound to actually hold on to what we came with, all right? That God created man and woman and created, what do you call, sexuality as, what do you call, what's the name? Is it heterosexual, all right? Is that heterosexual? Yes? Yeah?
Yeah, heterosexual.
Exactly. So for the left, they believe that we probably evolve out of that. So that part of the evolution is people identifying their sexuality to be, what do you call, um, uh, homosexual. Do you get it? Whether they are, gays or they are lesbians, and they must be allowed to practice their sexuality. All right, that's what the left believes, and so that belief, which, somewhere, I mean, the left are called progressives or liberals. All right, that some of the areas, they're called, you know, believe in that. And those who believe in the right, or those who are actually right of center, they believe that we have what we call conservation. All right, we have to conserve, we have to preserve what had been given to us by God, in that terms. And so the idea that we evolve can never be allowed, especially when it comes to the way the issues of fundamentals of human beings, like sexuality, for example, that the right believes that it is something that was handed down and must be preserved. And so there shouldn't be space for that sexual evolution. So, and that's one of the modern day, ideological values. And so those of the right, which are called conservatives, all right, they mean to conserve what we have been given by nature, and so we cannot allow, what do you call, the evolution of sexuality. So we cannot allow gays, we cannot allow what do you call, lesbians, etc. But we have to protect. When it comes to family, they also believe that family has to be protected. So they do not believe in issues about divorce and things. They hardly do that. So they will give incentives for people to live together as opposed to, going a separate way. They don't believe in abortion, for example. So the issue of abortion, again, takes an ideological position. So the left says that women and men must have their liberty to decide whether they want to keep a baby or they do not want to keep a baby, especially when that baby or that pregnancy has actually come about as a result of issues like rape, or unintended pregnancies. What if somebody gets pregnant just by accident or just by being raped? Must that person by all means keep the baby when they could be faced with other consequences, all right, regret, etc.? Or what if it's in the danger of the person carrying it? Must they still keep it? But the right would say that no, you cannot abort in any circumstances, all right? And whatever the circumstances, your first responsibility is to keep it because that is God-given. And they would actually advance that debate. So it goes on and on. Obviously, that is not generic, all right? Yes, Gifty, I'll come back to you. Let me finish that.
Okay.
That's not generic. Now, in some countries, the definition of liberalism, all right, is changed, from the Western concept of liberalism. And even those who believe in the left in other countries, for example, there's a cultural nuances, all right. For example, in Ghana, for example, it is very, very unheard of for any political party, whether left or right, to support what do you call homosexuality. Do you get it? To accept or to seem to be accepting, homosexuality, like yes, be gay or be lesbian, because of the cultural identity. So at some point, the ideological positions are influenced by cultural dynamics, all right, and so cannot be held holistic, as they emerge, from what do you call, from the Western culture. So there are some cultural influences, and I think that would be a good study, looking at cultural influences of ideological position, as we know them. Okay, Gifty, come in.
Oh, I wanted to ask if one government can be both socialist and then capitalist, but I think you've answered that. That's the cultural nuance.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So
yeah.
certainly, yes, you're very right. So over time, there had been a fusion, of the ideological positions, and parties have realized that you cannot be holistically, conservative, or you cannot be holistically liberal. At some point in time, you would end up fusing the two, marrying the two, and that's what we call the third way. All right, it defined quite a number of political parties' behaviors in the West. It started off from Giddens' book, The Third Way, and looking at the modern political parties and the way they behave, that they rise up to the middle in order that they could actually imbibe both left and right values. And so you're not likely to see a completely leftist agenda or a completely rightist agenda in terms of mainstream political parties, but there are political parties that are still left left-leaning or right-leaning. Yeah, and these are, we call them extreme parties, and most of the time you find them in Europe's, Western Europe, sometimes in America. The Tea Party movement, for example, is actually likened to the right, far right or extreme right political. When you go to Italy, for example, you see, and Spain, for example, you see parties that are very much left or very much right. And UK, for example, also has that type of parties. In Ghana, it's difficult to actually see parties that are really extreme left or extreme right. Obviously, the identities are actually lost on them anyway. Even the main parties are struggling with their ideological positions. They don't finally come out with how they represent. So we're talking about party identities and what actually define it, all right? And we're saying that at the core is their belief in how social values are formed, all right? And how, social problems are actually solved. And that actually comes from that perspective. So the idea is that, okay, so how do we actually determine sexuality? Must we allow people, or must we sanction policies that allow people to come out and say, look, I feel gay, or I feel lesbian, or look, I feel that I have multi-sexuality, and so I must be allowed to marry. These have implications for our lives, all right? They have implications for living. So once that is accepted, then it's codified in terms of policy. Then a lady can hold a lady's hand into church and say, we are marrying, and there would not be any social upheaval, all right? Or a man can hold a man's hand, into church and say, we're married, and there wouldn't be any social upheaval or social injustices meted at them, all right? And that's how we solve, social problems, by defining and redefining values, what we think are the core values that govern our lives, whether we must allow progressiveness or we must, stick to conservatism. That's, the process. And the same applies to, education, all right? Must education policy allow, some introduction of new forms of knowledge, new forms of awareness? And that's why there was a huge debate about you remember the debate about the school educational reform that they were going to, they call it CST or whatever. You remember? The comprehensive sexuality policy.
Yeah.
Did you hear it? You heard it, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
there were a lot of debates about that. These are some of the things that we talk about. So must we actually allow new forms of knowledge? And must we actually allow our children to be taught, some of these things? So they define policy, party identity. I'm sure you understand party identity. Yeah? But party identity does not only come from ideological leanings, all right? Party identity also comes from history, all right? The party's history is also important in the ideological, in identity creation. So what does the party represent? So if you take, for example, CPP, it takes its root from the arrival of Nkrumah into the UGCC, at the time. So the time that he departed and formed, CPP. And the idea that the CPP was formed by broad mass of people, all right? It was ordinary people who actually championed the formation of, CPP, especially women. Women are at the core of CPP because they actually funded, what do you call, Nkrumah. It was women who actually funded Nkrumah, market women who actually brought their pieces, their small contributions to make sure that, Nkrumah succeed in CPP. Why? Because at the time it was believed that UGCC was too, what do you call, aristocratic. They were too bourgeois, all right? And they were too centered. So you have, the echelons of CPP being, academics, lawyers, all these kind of top 1% Ghanaians. And they are the ones who say, we've taken decision, and they will announce it to people, etc. They didn't allow the engagement of ordinary people into decision making. It doesn't mean that ordinary people were not in UGCs. They were followers, but they were not actually in decision making. And from Nkrumah's perspective, that limited the agenda of independence, because if you want independence, then you want the people to be part and parcel of decision making in determining their future. All right. So that was the separation. And Nkrumah thought that the UGCC was too formalized. And so he wanted to break away to have a party that was mass. And that's, the definition of center-left political party. So that in itself defined the character or the identity of CPP and UGCC from, ideological set perspective. So he formed CPP. That history is part of identity of political party. If you look at the history of, UGCC itself, and then UP and then PP and all those, you realize that the formation is part of its identity. The idea that, a certain class of people actually form the party. And that's why you hear a lot of people say, if you're an academic and if you believe that you are a knowledgeable person, you must belong to MPP. It's simplistic, but in somehow, some way, it has a bearing on its formation because MPP came about as a club, all right, of elite. And that is, a fact. That is a historic fact. That club was a club of lawyers, was a club of businessmen, was a club of academics, was the club of elite, public service, leaders. So these guys had that club, which they call, I think, Dankwa or something. All right. So at the time when the PNDC lifted the ban, yeah, at the time when, Nana, you wanted to say something? Okay. So at the time when, PNDC lifted the ban on party politics, all right, which is, somewhere in 1991, between 1990 and 1991, before we started we did the what is called the referendum, all right? Or I think, yeah, after the referendum, within that period, cycle 90. When they lifted the ban, that club, metamorphosed into the political party, which is the MPP. But of course, its traditions, the people in there had already been part of a political party prior to that, all right? And at that time, CPP was still banned, so CPP couldn't actually form alongside MPP because I think, PNDC wanted to metamorphose into a political party, and allowing CPP to actually form would mean that CPP would automatically take its left position. And if CPP takes its left position, it will be difficult for PNDC to form into NDC, all right? Because in most cases, especially with the kind of a political system that we have, which we call the first past the post, electoral system. It is always difficult to have three-party, system or three-party scenario where you have three competing political parties. Usually, it is two, black or white, or left or right. All right, that kind of scenario. So suddenly, CPP had to be banned in order that NDC can form and to take the position of the left. All right. So that scenario happened. And so those who couldn't form or have accommodation with NPP, remember I've said that NPP is of people of certain caliber, all right? And they are of the right. Now, others who couldn't actually see themselves to be in the right of a particular caliber, etc., but they identify with the left and naturally would have gone into CPP. They ended up in NDC because they were keen to participate in the new political system. And the participation from the right couldn't be a good place for them because they do not feel that they belong to the right. All right. Now, the idea of political identity is also, an emotive one. You can still be a rich person and feel that you are of the left as opposed to of the right. Why? Because the formation of human beings, you probably had lived in communities, you had lived in compound houses, you are part of the working class. Now, when you grow up and then you become a rich person, don't forget, you don't lose that identity easily. And so it is simplistic to think that rich people would be certainly of center right, because you have rich people in center left. It is also simplistic to think that poor people, so to speak, people of working class character, etc., would be certainly on the left, because there are some people who also have, other beliefs, other than other values, other than their beliefs. So, from religious perspective, the person may feel that yes, we must be conservative, and so their definition of being in the party of the right is not as a result of their ideological or of their material or economic identity, but it is from their religious identity. They belong to the right. Are you getting it? Are you guys following?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I want to get a sense that I'm making sense to you guys. So there are so many. So there are so many factors in some, so many factors that come to identify a political party, and so there are so many factors that come to identify a person that belongs to a political party. So we cannot actually use one dimension to say, because of this, you have to belong to the left, or because of that, you have to belong to the right. It's simplistic. We have to look at the nuances of values of other identities before somebody could actually say, no, I think that I belong to the left or right. And others actually belong to political parties just for sheer, belongingness. I mean, they don't really think about some of these nuances and say I belong. They're there because maybe somebody says they should be there, or they're there because their parents are there. And from that is also another position. People belonging to a political party because of the association or the network that they're in, belonging there. They feel that. And that's also right, right? Of course, others also belong to some political parties because of what they can get. And these are all forms of belongingness and political identities. All right. Then, of course, we have credibility, we have profile, organization. The way the party mobilizes its people is also a point of attraction. All right. And also is used for party identification. And so sometimes you hear people say, we are center left, like the NDC people. They say we are for common people. No, please, can't hear you. Gilbert, can you hear me? Maybe it's your network. Guys, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. We can hear you clearly.
Okay. Okay. So the way the political party mobilizes is also, a part of identity. And that's why sometimes you can hear people say, oh, as for us, we are for ordinary people, ordinary people belong to our party. Some people will say, oh, as for us, we are elite or we're knowledgeable, etc. All these are part of that. Okay. Now, let's take programs. All right. Now, the programs and policy identity. So, from what we have described, from the position of political party identity and mobilization profile, etc., you should see its traces in the policies. When obviously NDC talked about Okada, which one of you actually mentioned it, Okada. It has its lineage, or it has its identity from the political party's identity, from the behavior. So you expect that a party of the left will propose policies such as that and say, oh, there are some young people in some part of the country who cannot afford to drive taxis, and they want to find work for themselves, and so they want to drive Okada. Now, that is an ideological debate, all right? So the question is, does Okada mar the social fiber and so should be banned, or does it actually provide value, economic value to a certain class of people and so must be allowed? That's ideological debate. It's an ideological question. So those who feel that Okada is dirtying our streets, and when you're driving there, that's your perspective. But somebody also feels that, look here, Okada provides employment for some people. Okada provides livelihood for some people. All right. They also have a case. So then you throw it to the people in ideological debate, in policy, and as we saw in elections, and they're defining the two parties and defining your choice. So if you feel strongly that Okada provides economic sustenance, for some people, you vote the one who is proposing it. If you feel that no, Okada is actually messy, it's creating a lot of accidents. People are maimed by Okada's driving. People are actually losing their lives because of Okada. Then you vote the other side. You vote against it, i.e., you vote MPP because that was their position. All right. So the policies that actually come out, they are not just coming out; they have ideological identity on it. Sometimes there's a fusion, all right, or sometimes there's a crisscrossing, and as we see in free education, all right, free education is a crisscrossing policy because you would expect free education to come from a center-left political party like NDC, all right, but it came from the right, which is MPP. Now that is an ideological confusion, for followers of politics, because the point is that the one who proposes state intervention in education, in unemployment, etc., is the one who belongs to the left. Why is it that it's rather the right person who's actually proposing, state intervention in education? And that is what we call a dilemma, all right? But it shouldn't surprise you because, as I said, there's, and which one of you actually asked, earlier on, there's a fusion of the political ideological positions. There's a center emerging that political parties over the world, throughout the globe, are all coming to the center in order that they could pick and choose what makes sense, for the people and ensure that they implement such policies. So if a center-right party feels strongly that no, to solve education, I think I have to go into free education, yes, they can go there. And if a center-left party feels that no, to solve issues of social, what do you call this, integration, etc., perhaps I must not accept sexuality of any modern form. They can go there, all right? And so that's the point. But usually it is not just the pronouncement of the word free, denotes or can actually show the ideological, separation. Nana?
Sir,
Yes, go on.
yes, please. I just wanted to ask, don't you think the MPP, the introduction, they moving to the other side, that is the ideologies of the NDC, it wasn't probably for them to bring policies to help the people, but I think that it could be they being eager for power, and probably they saw that it was a chance for them to gain the hearts of the electorate.
Okay.
So that's what brought the fusion.
Okay, I can agree with what you're saying, but I think that it's down for analysis, all right, because it's subject to debate. Whether that was the intention or not, we can't tell. It will be unfair for us to say that was the intention, okay? Unless, of course, we have analyzed it and come out with findings to suggest that indeed that's what they sought. Are you with me? So it will be fair to give them the benefit of the doubt that indeed it was their intention to solve education issue, as opposed to the intention to gain votes. These are two separate things, all right? So it will be very fair for us to stick to the idea that they intended to solve educational issue, as opposed to the extreme, saying that it was intended to gain votes. But that in itself cannot be ruled out, all right? The point that you raised is a crucial one, cannot be ruled out, but it's subject to further analysis, very rigorous analysis to prove that indeed they did that just to win. And I can understand that because some people actually believe that was the case. Why? Because if that was not the case, and that's the argument, certain things would have actually shown, all right? And I particularly, if I should actually put forward my position, I particularly felt that the most prudent policy, under the free SHS was to means test, i.e., separate those who can afford, from those who cannot afford completely, in order that you can create fiscal space, to attend to other social issues that we had. But they decided to have a wholesale implementation, which actually gives grounds to believe that it was just for vote. All right. But that cannot be enough ground. We have to dig deep into it and then come out with that justification. A good thing. Good point, Nana. Okay. So yeah. So we actually look at policies identity, from the party's identity. Sometimes the policy identity may come from the leader's own beliefs. All right. And if we take Nanado and Kufuor, for example, they belong to the same party, but their values, their core values are completely different. Do you get it? And so you cannot actually holistically say that because the political identity is this, the policy identity will be that, because those who lead the party would have some, resemblance, in the policy that they push. Remember, they are the ones leading. They are the ones, looking at the lenses and thinking, okay, this is the direction I want to actually take my people. All right. So policy identity also comes from sometimes the candidate identity, not so much from the party's identity, but the candidate. Candidate beliefs actually, kind of form part of or embed in what do you call policy identities. All right. So when we're talking about the policy, also we're talking about the values. All right, inherent in the policy. Like, for example, NDC will tell you, we're talking about, what do you call? We're not talking about the few, all right, but we're talking about, what's the word they use? Who can remind me? Inclusion, all right? Policies that are inclusive, policies that are actually can bring about social cohesion, all right? So the values, of the policies must also be highlighted. And these NPP will tell you about the values of, free SHS and say, free SHS is an inclusive policy. It's about equity. It's about giving everybody the part of the pie. And so we cannot say, let's separate those who can from those who can't pay. And that's why the free SHS is universal, because all of us will pay taxes. All of us have, right to the national cake. They would advance that argument, which I still disagree. And my disagreement, I've made it known to them on several platforms, not only, as teaching you guys, but I've made it known that even in our traditional homes, all right, in our homes, those who have broad chest, when I say broad chest, those who have money, they go out to help their cousins and their nieces. And that's why when you go to a particular home, all right, the man has only one child, but there are about 5 people living in the home. Why? Because he's taking on his auntie's, children, he's taking on his sister's children, his brother's children, and he's taking care of them. So even in our traditional sense, if you have a broad chest in the family, all right, you take on the problems of other people to actually solve, all right, in order that the family can actually put its foot in a particular place. So the idea that, yes, free SHS is inclusive, it's equity, it's giving everybody the chance. I don't believe in that, because I believe that some people can pay and must be asked to pay more than other people in society. All right. So we come to candidate identity. So in the campaign, you're also looking at how do you frame the candidate? What are the things that you use to frame the candidate? Already we've talked about the beliefs, all right? So the belief systems that actually come to form the identity. So you're looking at the candidate's core beliefs, all right? What are the things that a candidate believes? Obviously, a candidate of a center left must believe in a center left, all right? Candidate of center right must believe in. But the other things that actually come into the candidate's beliefs is the candidate's own upbringing, all right? And that's why sometimes we call some candidates as though they have a golden spoon in their mouth, all right? We believe that their upbringing does not, allow them to believe in a certain things, all right? So if we believe that if you're a rich kid, you probably haven't seen poverty before. So your understanding of poverty alleviation may be different from someone who has lived it. And so when we're describing candidate, we're looking at their upbringing, all right? We're looking at their family settings. We're looking at their religious backgrounds, all right? We're looking at the schools that they attended. And that's why you see all these things come into the campaign. Campaign has some funny way of bringing people perspective. They say, oh, wait, he goes school Abrochiri all his life. He doesn't actually understand these things. Oh, this person, or Uncle School, Uncle School, he doesn't actually know. He's not educated. So he can't actually. So all these things come in the campaign. Why? Because they form the identity of the human being. All right. They form the identity of the human being. The value set, the thing that the candidate, subscribe to. And usually the values can be seen from the person's behavior and their utterances, all right? The things that the person actually utters actually come out, or brings their values out. And unfortunately for us, our media, and that's to you guys, you have to be very, very circumspect, all right? And you have to be very critical. Our media does not query people's values from their utterances. Sometimes we think people just utter words, but if you want to understand what is in someone's head and what someone is capable of doing, listen to what they say, because words are not just words. They are belief sets, belief systems that people actually, or that manifest in communication. Are you following me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I don't know whether you've seen that video of the guy who is saying that he has the right to fart at the partner, but the partner hasn't got the right to fart at him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Now, how do you describe that guy in terms of values? How do you describe him? What if you have to put a name for him, describing him in terms of values, what would you say he is? Nobody?
So let's take the value out and then let's put something.
Okay, so
quite simple.
Yeah, quite simple. So how would you describe him? Just forget about value. How would you describe? What would you say he is? Yeah. So this is someone that you can say he's chauvinistic. All right, he's male dominant.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
He's what's the other word that you can? So certainly someone like that in a policy position, all right, or in a position to make decisions, certainly you can expect certain kind of decisions from him. There's someone who probably would feel that women may not have, or should not be allowed to have decision-making roles. Do you get it? And
so equally
leadership. Yeah, go on.
You could say that such a person wouldn't allow equality, as in the male and the female having the opportunity to do something equal.
That's right. Because he goes ahead to say, I'm the head of the family. So I have the right to do that. She hasn't got the right to do that. So certainly when it comes to pay, for example, decisions on pay, this guy is likely to say that men have to be paid more than women, regardless of they doing the same work. All right. And of course, just to be fair to him, he's also likely to say that women are the weaker, vessels, and so men have to do the hard work. All right, it's to be fair to him. All right, so you probably would see such a person thinking, "I'm the man, let me carry it." All right, other than somebody like me who would think that, oh, we all have equal strength, so you can carry. I can
Let's
carry.
all carry it.
Exactly. You see, so they have their, depending on how you see it, you could say they have their good side. If you feel that by defining women as, we all have same strength, it's a bad thing to do, then you can say the guy has that good as a strength. All right, that side has a strength, as a good strength, And if you feel that by saying women are weaker cells and men are the strong ones, it's a very terrible thing to do. Then, of course, misogynistic. Exactly. Hey, Charlie, Margaret said, can we say he's misogynistic? Fantastic. Yes, you can say that. Margaret, please explain misogynistic to us, because some of us, Yanko,
Mr. Jenny.
Yes.
Mr.
Yeah,
Jenny.
Mr. Jenny, that's right. So yeah, you can say that he is. You see, and he's rallying some people. Some people do think that he's right. So that's how candidates are framed. This guy with this particular clip, all right, in future, if he's in a political position, a leadership position, and he actually says something in terms of policy, people will refer him to this. He probably might have changed position over time because we change, all right? Human beings are dynamic. We are not static. Now, anyone who actually sticks to a particular ideological beliefs for so long and doesn't change, they always call them dogma, right? They are dogmatic. It means that they don't change their position. They believe in one ideological. So, he's also old school. Okay, good. All right, so we can actually say that, that old school, that's conservative thinking. Okay, so that's how candidates are framed, with what they say, with how they behave, with their attitude. All right, attitude to things. Some attitude are, what do you call, two dimensions. You either react or you are neutral. Whether you react positively or negatively, or you are neutral. You can say three positions. Right. So again, credibility, all right, is what we use to also define candidates. So in the campaign, we're looking at the candidate's credibility, and credibility comes again from actions, past historic records of the individual, whether the individual had been consistent or not. And that's why the Mahama had a problem in the campaign when he said that he's also sticking to free SHS, and Nanado went hard on him, about credibility, that he's been inconsistent. So inconsistency actually generates credibility issue. If you're not consistent on issue, but that is on one side. On another side, it also shows that if you're consistent on issues, it's a dogmatic position because you're not recognizing the dynamics in life, that things change, from time to time. So it depends on how you frame the campaign, or your opposition or your opposing candidate is able to stick the tag on you. Because having changed position from not supporting free SHS to supporting free SHS itself is not a credibility issue. In fact, it's supposed to enhance credibility. But if you're not able to define it well, then your opponent can stick credibility, issues for you to say that you're inconsistent. You don't actually have a strong belief set. Evelyn.
So with the issue of free SHS, I think Mahama being inconsistent, I quite see this in a different angle, because to him, listening to him, he was kind of in the way of free SHS, because he was trying to build the structures. He was trying to make build the room for free SHS to make it more comfortable for people. So he not voicing out to talk about free SHS didn't mean that it wasn't part of his policies. But when you look at the developmental projects he has been able to undertake, should tell you that he was on the path of it. So things, turn out the other way, that he had to give the mantle to Akufo-Addo. Yes, so he was frank about the fact that yes, he was also paving way for free SHS, which I think he was right.
Excellent. That's a very good debate. So yeah, exactly what Evelyn said. It is how you debate it. It is how compelling you're able to frame your debate to challenge the opposition's narrative. Now, in campaign, it's competition of ideas. So you have to be able to demonstrate to people, how your other ways of doing it actually result in the same results, or actually has the same effect, which earlier on we said that, campaign effect is about, it has come, okay, thanks. Which we said that campaign effect is about the results, all right? And one of you said that what struck her was that, all of them were actually saying the same thing, but from different perspectives. So yes, the NDC could argue that, look here, it is not because we're against free SHS, but it was because we thought some fundamental structures must be in place first. That's why we defined it as progressive free SHS. But I think that I'm not sure where the fault was, but I think that the NPP was much more compelling with their naming of saying free SHS without adding progressives and attacking the progressive one as not free SHS. And perhaps they were foremost in defining what the free mean. All right. So we're looking at campaigning and how you identify, your policy. So they were foremost in defining what the free SHS meant, and they're perhaps clearer in articulating that position to Ghanaians than the NDCs. NDC perhaps was muddled and muffled, from the beginning before they found their feet, and so contributed to their messaging issues. Yeah, Nana. Nana, come in. You're on mute. Unmute yourself. Yeah. Nana, we can't hear you. Okay, you're on karaoke mode now. Yeah, listen.
What you said, I'm sorry.
Nana, your line is on karaoke mode. Check your location and come back. All right. Any questions or contribution before Nana comes back? Okay, let's go on. So I hope you have understood, the three elements and how you're identifying and defining them for the campaign. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now let's move on. So we said that, for campaign to happen, there must be institutional conditions, all right? There must be some conditions available for us to see that there's a campaign underway. All right, and so date of election is known. So we say that a campaign is underway. That is the institutionalized campaign or the defined campaign is underway when we know the election date. Yeah, also defines end of campaign. So whenever we know election date, there's a campaign, period. And fortunately, unfortunately for us, our campaign date is always known, isn't it? 4 years every time, and it's in December, and it's from 7th or so. Any of time, I mean, many times these are the, the dates that the campaign is held. So unfortunately for us, we are always in a campaign mode because we already know the campaign dates, all right? And then the identity of the candidate is known. Whenever we get into campaign also when we know the identities of the parties candidate, all right? So parties go to Congress, they select or they elect their candidates, whether MPs or presidential candidates. Once that is done, again, you know that we're heading towards campaign, we're in campaign season. And then of course, certain actions that are not normally regulated or unregulated are now regulated, in some cases forbidden. So we also get to know that we are in campaign period when you see parties starting to raise funds, printing, sending their posters around. And you see that, we start regulating how posters have to be, sent to the public, billboards. Obviously, the AMA, I think, has a policy on how long a campaign billboard should be around certain areas. I hope that by now they should have actually been taken out, but you see quite a number of them still littered around, So yes, there are institutional conditions to demonstrate that we're in campaign season, including, when there must be, what do you call, advertisements, advertising, etc. The airwaves, all right. And then of course there's what we call uncommon intensity, all right. So you realize that during campaign season, there's uncommon intensity. The intensity is high. The media intensity is high. All right. And I'm sure a lot of you experienced it during the last elections. I mean, everything was politics. Politics was the only game in town. There's an uncommon intensity on individuals, all right? And there are some individuals we didn't even know that we started hearing their names, isn't it? I mean, how many of you knew Chema Wuntumi or have heard that name before the election?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, Sophie, check your network. So how many of you knew Chema Wuntumi before the election or didn't know him? How many of you haven't heard that name? Yeah, so Margaret said I didn't. Yeah, so the campaign effect, the campaign has some uncommon intensity, and that's one of the effects. Yeah, go on. Who was saying something? Evelyn, you were saying something.
Sir, I was like, I've heard his name before on political platforms and all that.
Okay, yeah. So there's an uncommon intensity on some issues as well, all right? So in fact, campaign actually, prime issues, isn't it? There are some issues that we didn't know, but the campaign actually primes it, right? The campaign, creates uncommon intensity on some individuals. Professor Jenana Opoku, for example, I'm sure a lot of people have not heard her name before, although he's been a CEO of one of the biggest universities. The VP of one of the biggest universities. But we didn't know her, all right, until the campaign. So there's uncommon intensity. I can't hear. Sophie says she can't hear me. Sophie, you have to check your network. All right. So there's uncommon intensity on a number of things. Goom, for example. We didn't know about that guy. I have not heard him before. Yet, he became prominent. So because of the intensity, of the campaign, or the intensity of media, on the campaign, people take advantage of it to become popular, to become important in society. We also kind of take groups of people, use that as opportunity to highlight their plight. We saw that with Men's Gold, customers, isn't it? The campaign gave them the platform to highlight their plight. We heard a lot of groups coming out to say, if the government doesn't do A, B, C, D, they won't vote, and then they get publicity in that sense. All right. So when we see an uncommon intensity in the political order, in a lot of public debates, a lot of press conferences. We saw one of the most innovative press conferences ever by Sami Jemfi, by the fireside kind of thing, where by the riverside, he will go to the riverside, organize press conference. I'm sure it hadn't happened in this country before, seeing the press conference held by the river or by the riverside. We saw so many innovative things in the system. And so we said that we know that we are in political campaign season when there's an uncommon intensity in the system. So campaign activity is more likely to register on citizens' minds as election draws near. There's an interaction between campaign effort and the approaching deadline of election day, isn't it? So uncommon intensity, evidence of greater salience manifests itself in media attentiveness, of course, isn't it? So you see a lot of media, work, campaign interest, political discussions, knowledge about candidate policy and party positions, strength of vote intentions, etc. So you hear a lot of polls, including mine. How many of you know my poll? How many of you know my poll? The poll that I do. You've not heard it before. The IPO. Have you heard the IPO before?
Oh.
Evelyn, have you heard the IPO?
No, sir.
No, please.
Okay, yeah, we ran a poll called IPO, and it was one of the, I think, 3 polls during the election that, we actually predicted a runoff Okay, Cecil, you filled one, right? And Deborah said herself. Yeah, we actually predicted a runoff actually in our poll. We thought that the election would go because in our poll that we conducted, none of the candidates got 50%. But we had our poll has a limitation because it's an online poll. All right, we generate on smartphones, so our poll does not cover people who do not use smartphones and things, and so definitely it has that limitation. But it was representative enough in terms of the ideas. I mean, we had run the poll over 3 periods, and all the 3 times that we had actually run the poll, we saw some dynamics that actually kind of indicated that the election will be on a runoff. It was discussed a number of times on City FM, and they called me a lot of times. We insisted that the election will go on runoff. But of course, others suggested, a fantastic win for the government or the incumbent, right? So whatever the outcome is, of course, we're now in court, so perhaps the court will determine that, or the court proceedings, not the court determined, but the court proceedings may determine what the actual issue was. Evelyn?
Sir, please, talking about the court proceedings, how is it possible that we have already student and maybe he's not the one supposed to be president and you're going to give it to the other party? How is that going to be possible? Won't that breed chaos and anarchy?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the wonders of democracy, isn't it? Certainly, you cannot actually foresee how should the court proceedings or the court results go the other side. You cannot actually foresee how the other side will be asked to step aside. But it has happened before. In Malawi, it happened. So we cannot predetermine it. We only have to allow the system to take its course. I mean, but to answer your question, that how is that possible? It's been possible. Malawi just annulled the elections and they asked for a rerun. Now, I think that's the safe position, other than saying one has to step aside for one to take over. But that is for the courts to determine. But I think in those places that has happened, they have asked for rerun, and when they did a rerun, the opposition won, and so I think the one that actually was installed earlier had to, take it by their chin. So there's history, there's precedence, that could be followed. But it's very hard to see, as you're actually, saying. I'm sure a lot of people are also in the same position, that they feel that it's very hard to see. Okay, great question. All right. So again, strength of vote intention. Again, when we were conducting our polls earlier on before the elections or towards the, there were quite a lot of people who said that they were not going to vote. All right, they were not going to vote. Some actually showed, that they were not going to turn up. Now, towards the election, very close to the election, when we had another poll, now the intention to vote had increased. Now, almost quite a lot of people had said that they intend to vote. So you realize the campaign has that effect of rallying people, all right, making people make their minds up. So before the election campaigns, a lot of people had said that they were not going to vote. And I'm sure some of you had come into that conclusion that you were not going to vote. Now, towards the election, very close to the election, people change their minds and say, wow, I have to vote, all right? So the campaign has that effect of rallying people or making people make their minds, right? And that's one of the effects that the campaign has, okay? Any question or contribution? Okay, let's move on. We have how many minutes? Okay, 40 minutes, right? Now, the uncommon intensity, again, another indicator of intensity is the mass media, attention to the campaign. Of course, we've said that. Media coverage will reflect on what will attract the audience. Media attention increases towards the end of campaign. Of course, coverage in most cases focus on the front runners. All right. So as you saw, quite a lot of time about Nanado and Mahama. Very little coverage on the other, candidates. So we always say that the front runners, those who are actually, front runners or have the ability to assume the presidency, are the ones who usually would throw light on. But for some people, they may not be front runners, but they are certain characteristics actually make them gain media attention as well. Like what we saw with Goom, for example. And I think his I don't know what actually made him that popular, but I think he has the followers, some followers already, and that actually propelled him that popularity. Nana?
Sir.
Yeah, Nana, we can hear you.
Yes, please. What made him popular is that he has a TV station himself.
Mm-hmm.
So he was able to project his ideologies and his policies. So I think that contributed to that. Because I'm sure if the other candidates had media houses themselves, they would also project and sell their ideologies to the electorate.
That's right. So he had some following already through his media activities and his church, right? I understand he has a church. Okay.
Yes, he has.
Deborah.
Yeah, so to add up to what my colleague just said, the reason why people voted for him as well is because of his ideology. He has this humanism ideologies in mind. So he wanted to promote the work of Nkrumah. That's why people voted for him as well.
Great. Okay, so that was a good point. So people thought that, in Nkrumah's ideological positions, he was the one representing that most. Okay, that's great. All right, thank you. Okay, let's move on. So again, mass media intensity, indicators of intensity is also measured in effort in party and candidate marketing, television, radio advertisement. Obviously, we know that. And then the contextual understanding. So institutional definition of campaigns suggests that campaigns could be graduated, isn't it, from those that do not exist to those that overwhelm voters, parties, and the media, where information flow is key variable, which shape public opinion. So from contextual position also, as we can say, the campaign actually graduates. So Ekura Donko was also known due to her behavior. Okay, that's great. Yeah. So that's Margaret saying and utterances, and she was funny as well in her representation. Great. Yeah, true. Cecil says, last political season saw an increase in the use of social media too. Almost all candidates used it for campaign and political marketing. There was huge investment in social media adverts. True. Yes, exactly. So these are all the intensity that we're talking about. All right. And we're saying that the campaign graduates, at some point you realize that the campaign ebbs, all right. The ebb and flow, or you can the ebb and flow. Sometimes you realize that one campaign is going down, then it just surges, And there were quite a number of approaches that people used to graduate the campaign, all right? Using sometimes negativities, Sometimes you hear somebody is being arrested or somebody has been sanctioned for arrest. You hear Papano and Mamino, and then you hear a whole lot of Japa and all those things, all right? These are all mechanisms that political parties use to sort of graduate, the campaign. And then, of course, the other campaigns also that you call local campaigns, right? Obviously, the MP's campaign would not assume the same level of intensity as the campaign for the presidential candidate. Why? Because the presidential candidate campaign is more national, all right? Whereas the MP's campaign are more local. So sometimes you realize that some constituencies, because of their national character, although they are constituencies within demographic area, maybe the personalities involved are of national character. So the campaign actually assumes that intensity, and sometimes the individuals involved are not that known. And so the campaign, doesn't assume a level of intensity. They're all, kind of contextual issues to, how campaigns are defined in terms of intensity, etc. So the intensity could also be contextual, as battleground constituencies are more intense than safe seats, all right? So when you look at constituencies like Odododio, you remember Odododio?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Odododio has always been an intense battleground, right? There is not a single election that you've never heard Odododio. Not a single election in this country. Every day, Odododio is in the public light. Every day there's intensity there. And even this election, it was mad, coupled with Bukom Banku and his gimmicks and things. So there are some constituencies, battleground constituencies, that are always in the public light because of their nature, all right? There are some too that you never heard, all right? I mean, there are a lot of constituencies. You hardly hear some of them. And another constituency that has become so popular, although it's a constituency, but becomes so popular in a national election, is Ningo Pram Pram, yeah? Ningo Pram Pram. I'm sure you know that. Sam George.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also assumed a level of intensity that in recent years, I mean, those days you never heard of, obviously you guys are young, but those days I never heard Ningo Pram Pram until recently. Of course, that man, what's his name? I've forgotten it, something Mensa.
Honorable Iti Mensa.
Iti Mensa, Honorable Iti Mensa. Honorable Iti Mensa is popular, of course, one of the key guys in PNDC, NDC. So Ningo Pram Pram had, some, recognition, but I think the level of intensity has gone bigger now because obviously Sam George and his influence and all those things that actually happen. Which other constituency that has assumed intensity? Which other constituencies?
Ayawa,
Sir, please, where's school going? Where's school going?
Exactly, yeah, Ayawa Suwago. Hey, Charlie, that is also one intensity, serious one. Of course, because of the characters involved. Who is iPhone? Who is iPhone?
So it's me, it's Anas. So the Lejo Kuku. So what they did to Honorable Dr. Okobo.
Oh yeah.
So my people, do you know that I had opportunity to speak to I had opportunity to speak to quite a number of people, like they're grown women, and they were saying that because Okobo banned them from observing the Homoho, that was why they voted against him. I was like, no, he was even looking for your health, because COVID is real. You get it? So engaging in such activities, you are prone to get that sickness. So if someone is trying to help, why then you vote against him? And no one said that is how it is. No MP comes and stays more than 8 years. You after 4 years you will go. So Ayuku will go next 4 years. Maybe another person will come.
Yeah. So you see the way they think. I mean, the understanding of the voter is completely different from the understanding of the other parties involved in the campaign, and that's why understanding the voter is crucial. You see, I think that Okoboy perhaps should have actually had some little bit of appreciation of the voter psyche, the voter psychology. Do you get it? And you would ask yourself why, even amongst the political parties, Nanado and John Mahama, even in the midst of COVID, why were they still out there? People know wearing masks and they were not talking about it. Were they showing irresponsibility, or were they thinking that yes, we needed the vote and so go to hell? And when Okoboy had actually tried to protect the people, he rather suffered the consequences, if that is the That's the reason. You see, so you probably want to appreciate the voter dynamics and the voter psychology in order that you can position your debate. And how are you going to persuade them is also key. Understanding the psychology and how are you going to persuade them is also key in there. Whether, I don't know, I didn't follow his campaign much to see whether his methodology was persuasive enough to let them know that indeed I'm rather trying to protect it. Yeah, Anas.
Say, I want to ask a question.
Yeah.
So with the electorate at Lejekuku, say this kind of people, what can you do? Because even if say I stayed there, I am around there, like the Lekma Road, it has been in bad shape. It was the presence of Dr. Okobwe. So if you see the way the place is looking nice now, you'll be surprised. But so these people, even if you do your best for them, they still don't appreciate. So with this kind of electorate, what other moves you take to convince them?
That's a very good question. And as I'll give that constituency for you to research, right? Now, what I would ask you to do is that you probably want to observe the trend, okay? Over the past, how long has the constituency been there?
Also, for quite a long time. It was only one man that stayed for 8 years. Even him, he died. I'll look for the name and get back to you.
That's right. So we can use it as a case study, all right? So what we're going to do is that we can actually trace right from the beginning of that constituency, right? Notedua, Lai says Notedua, Rebecca. So we're going to trace all those who have occupied that constituency over the years, all right? And look at their characteristics and what they did in comparison, with those who lost. And then we'll trace it cycle by cycle, all right? And then try to have it, because we need to have a theory for that, all right? We need to have a theory for that and be able to use that theory to explain how to deal with that constituency. If you deal with that constituency just like you're dealing with any other constituency, you're wrong, all right? But we have to actually look at the root cause. We have to look at the nuances of that constituency. What do they actually prime, or what do they actually take hold of as core values, all right? Perhaps their core value is not roads. I mean, you've built roads, yes, but did they really see the road as their core need? Perhaps no, all right? So we have to actually understand the psychology of the voters there in order to appreciate, what to institute. All right, Evelyn, Julius, your hand was up. So Margaret said there was no COVID during campaign election. Swearing of President J.J. Rawlings' funeral, but after all this, there was a rise in positive cases of COVID after all. Of course, there was COVID around. We only deceived ourselves that there was no COVID. My people are lazy and want to be fed. Okay, Hohe constituency was one of them. Sarafin says, for the first time, John Peter Amawu of the MPP won. Okay, Evelyn. Julius, your hand was up. Evelyn, let Julius start.
Talking about...
Julius, come in.
So I was saying, following where the they want to say for
Julius, you're on karaoke, so check and come again. Say it again. Your line is still on karaoke mode.
All right.
Yeah, check and come again. Evelyn.
Yeah, so I was trying to say that with the Lejekuku constituency, I was thinking that when you said we should understand their psychology and how to persuade them in order to win elections, sometimes the lady was like, he was able to do roads for them and all that. But sometimes they didn't need a road. Because if you survey the constituency very well, and then you are able to know that maybe 80% of the inhabitants of that constituency own vehicles, that is when you could say that, yes, at that particular time, their pressing need was that of roads. But then maybe he provided a road for them at the wrong timing, and then looking at their needs and then their wants. So maybe at that time they needed to celebrate Homo, because that is what was with roads. That was why I think could have caused his loss.
Okay, that's a good point to make. But before Cecil and us come in, let's say that, you know, we cannot actually schedule needs of people. All right, we can't say at one material time people need this and they don't want that. I mean, the idea that people in a particular place do not own cars does not necessarily mean that because of that they don't need roads. Because if the roads are bad, of course, people transport, things on the road. People use other cars to come to the place. People may have health issues because of the dusty areas. So not owning cars may not necessarily mean that because of that, they don't need a road, all right? And also that we couldn't actually say that in one material time, some people need roads more than they need, health, all right? If had it not been limitation on resources, all right, people would want everything at the same time. But because of resource limitation, and that's why we have to actually prioritize people's needs. But there is something about physical need, and there is something about other needs. For example, people's sociological needs. I mean, people's religious needs, people's belonging needs, for example. And we're referring to the homo, for example. Look, it does not mean that they need to celebrate the homo, over than over they need roads. But perhaps they hold the homo in high esteem because it's an epistemic need. It's something that actually defines their culture. And you see, when it comes to issues of culture, religion, and some of these fundamental values of human being, some people would even go to the extent of dying for that, all right? So you have to actually understand the nuances of that in addition to the economic need that you're solving or the physical need that you're solving. If you think that you could underplay people's cultural need and say, oh, but that's only homo, it doesn't add up to your life, but rather the roads, you're mistaken. All right, Cecil, come in first, and then Anas will come in, and Priscilla.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I perfectly agree with your submission. The homo is indeed something cherished by the people. In fact, it is one of the reasons why they are where they are today. It also helps bond them. It gives them an opportunity to have fun and connect with other groups in the Ga Adangbe family who also celebrate the homo.
And even connect with their ancestors, right?
Exactly, that too. So, and I also think town hall meetings, which we do not take seriously in this part of the world until probably there's an election coming up, and then the candidates would begin to engage with people. I think it's high time we relook at this and engage constituents consistently, so that at every point in time we can ascertain their needs and incorporate it into development plans and represent them appropriately in the House of Parliament.
Exactly. I mean, if you have to wait until campaign period before you start mobilizing and explaining things to people, surely that's what they will do to you, isn't it? So you're very right on that, Cecil. Continuous engagement. And that's one of the effects of, political communication. It actually results in engagement so that people would have the space and free will to engage with you over time. Anas.
Sir, please, and when you were saying, sir, when you were saying that the Omo is an activity that they hold pre-stage to, like it is where because of the Omo, that's why they've relocated to where they are now. So, but these people, say you know the Omo, it's not celebrated on their day. Oh. We have days they used to celebrate. So, could you imagine that the first day they allowed them to celebrate it, but they were like follow the precautionary measures, put on those masks. So if you go to Miami, and you see the way the boys are crowded. That was what even made the whole matter worse. They didn't follow the instructions that Okoboy gave them. That if you want to celebrate this kind of events, there is a sickness out there. You can celebrate, but try and follow that precautionary measure. They didn't do it. And so when Okoboy brought that restriction, they got angry. So by looking at things, yes, although their needs are also important, but sometimes you give them so they don't care about their health. Because after that city, a number of the COVID numbers like it rose to some extent, and then even the boys were trying to fight the policemen that came in. So this is sometimes we read a lot, it's our fault. You get it. Aside that they are trying to help us one way or the other, but sometimes we also have to think about our health. Because there's a, and then when sister was saying that the candidates are supposed to relate to us, like the town halls. Like so when they want election, that's when they're coming to us. So do care. We went to Pontus today. They didn't give him that support. Yeah, you know, though Lydia her best. Lydia started not long ago. She started for a very long time. She started with the people for a very long time. But I think Dumelo's efforts for the first time at least could be appreciated by the people. Because a such person who was even removing gutters. Oh, yeah. So sometimes it is we the electorate our fault. What do we want? Like sometimes we should let them know what we want so that at least they can attend to us. And this is serious.
There's one story in British politics history that actually defined the kind of thing that you said. There was a Labour party official who was interviewed to ask why they lost the election. He gave the analogy of a stage play, and he said sometimes the audience don't see well. So for the stage acting, the performers did well, but the audience didn't see well. So from what you're saying, the voters were wrong, right? And there had been some argument
very wrong.
There has been some argument like that at some point voters make mistake, because you think that, well, the candidates' positions were clear. And you see, some people even actually use the general election to say that they think that NDC did all that they could do, and in terms of messaging, perhaps they had the most compelling messaging. And so it was baffling to see, the incumbents retain power. And others also would say that, wow, after all this that Nanado did, free SHS, still Mahama was able to actually compete him fairly. So these are some of the debates that but you see, the point is that the customer, all right? The customer cannot be wrong because it is the customer who's giving you the money to sustain your business. If you don't understand them, your business will collapse. There's nothing you can do about it, all right? So yes, I can understand your frustration, having thought about Okobo, having done almost everything, trying to protect people, yet people thought that he wasn't fit for purpose. So we have to go back, and I don't know whether Okobo's team, and are you part of Okobo's team? Have you guys started analyzing?
Sir, no, I'm not part of his team, but I've gone, so you know the Lekma Hospital, he's a doctor. Yeah. I've gone there once, twice, and I've seen him attending to patients.
I agree.
Like but such a man like this.
The point I wanted to make is that has he started, researching into why the people are like that?
I don't know. Maybe you understand that is their behavior.
See, no. So you see, and that's one of the things that Cesar was talking about: the mistakes of politicians. After you've lost and you can't comprehend that behavior, immediately what you do is that you usher in, research. You can start organizing focus group discussions to understand fresh, because you don't want to wait until when the issue had gone and people have forgotten it. You want to fresh where the issue is hot, all right? You start organizing, small units of focus group and trying to understand their logic, their psyche. So why did you guys actually vote against Okoboy? And by the time you are done with the entire community, some things will emerge, and that can define your next, your next action. Julius, come in.
All right. Sir, please, I would want to say, in connection to the Homowo Festival, I mean, being part of the cause of Okoboy's defeat, I think to some extent the education didn't really go down well with the people. Because when sometimes when people tied themselves to religion in this regard, it becomes very difficult for them to accept something contrary, or as in this case, you preventing them not to celebrate their Homo festival.
That's right, yeah.
Though they you are part of the, how do we call it, the area, the community, but they don't see you as an authority in their religion or in this regard.
Yeah.
So they don't see the reason why you should come and tell them they shouldn't celebrate their festival and other stuff.
Amazing point.
Maybe assuming maybe Okoboy took the step and gain the religious leaders in them and turn his concern or the issue of COVID-19 to the leaders, and then the leaders will later sit down with the people and then talk to them. I think that way it would have been, go down well with them in a way.
Amazing point. Now, Julius, you are very, very right. In communication, we always talk about the messenger, all right? The credibility of the source credibility, all right? If they do not see you as an authority in that field, who are you to tell us, all right? But just like Julius said, if he had actually networked with the leaders of that particular culture and had allowed them to do the transmission of that critical information, perhaps he would have actually made some headway. Cecil, you're on mute. Unmute yourself.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was saying, based on anesthesia submission, I think candidates could capitalize on the occasion and educate their constituents on COVID and even share branded face masks ahead of the Homowo.
Yeah, fantastic point. All right, great, thank you. Yeah, peace.
Okay, sir, please, I think we've gotten to a point where majority of voters are now beginning to have an eye-opener when it comes to some of the things or the messages that are put across before elections. Taking John DeMello's submission, for instance, he did everything possible that could have led him to the seat. But then when he was on the field, people made him believe that, yeah, he was in the right line. They were going to vote for him. But just look at the outcome of the result. I think probably now voters have realized that sometimes when they want power, our people want power, they are very submissive. But then after they have gained the power, it turns to a different thing. So even now, those who are coming out to be genuine and then put across their messages in the right way, when they come, because of previous things that have happened or the way people previously presented themselves, it's not affecting them. So I think in John DeMello's case, previous or the past people who stood for that seat, or probably the things that the constituents have witnessed is what made him lose.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great submission. Yes, so people must see that you are genuine by your commitment and consistent commitment. Now, the knee-jerk, one-off antics are now being seen through, as Peace is talking about. Good point. All right, so let's move on. We'll just have about 10 minutes to finish. Yeah, so the intensity, okay, we've discussed that. So the campaign is the period right before citizens make a real political choice, which obviously we've seen the things that have actually, prevailed in the campaign. So defining campaign effect, the prevailing consensus is that campaign have minimal effect. I mean, that's what, in the literature, some people say that the campaign has minimum effect. They fail to persuade voters who, based on existing information that they have, make them have predetermined views, beliefs, prejudices of politicians, parties, and of issues, positions. Hence, campaigns rarely change majority's mind. And this is what Belson and Lazarsfeld are actually talking about. They feel that the campaign does not change much. It only, enforces people's beliefs and prejudices. Do you guys agree? Do you think that?
Yes. Especially in the
days
context
before the election, most of us had already made up our minds on who we were going to, but we're still interested in listening to what the others had to say. Often for the purpose of countering or saying that they lied or couldn't deliver on their initial promises.
Mm-hmm.
But there are very few who get to decide during the campaign period. Hence, I agree that the campaign has minimal effect.
Okay, who else wants to make a contribution? Thanks, Cecil. Fantastic. Yeah, who else?
Yeah, Doc.
Yeah, Julius.
Yeah, so I think it's very true because ahead of last year's election, I was to my more friends and I was like, so this year one and some of them were like, say the only say party we are with Yamano. So I kind of believe that so you are not taking the campaign messages from their policies, and it is true because these are the very people then who are they say they identify themselves as a political party, and so irrespective of policies, irrespective of your messages, they already have that preconceived mentality that this is the party I'm going to vote for. So
okay.
I think it is very true.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, let me ask you guys a simple question. How many of you by January, all right, January 2020, how many of you had not come to terms that they were going to vote? How many of you hadn't made your mind to vote by January 2020? Put up your hand, please. How many of you thought you were not going to vote, or by January? How many of you? Yeah, so Evelyn, okay, Gilbert, Deborah, okay, so let's see how many, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So Akosia, Joel, Deborah, Humu, Gilbert, Evelyn. We have Margaret. Okay, so all of you by January, you knew you were not going to vote, right? Okay, so 5 of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you knew you were not going to vote. Now, by June, how do you change your mind by June to vote?
Yes.
By June.
Yes.
By June, how many of you? By June is when the COVID had actually intensified, and people were saying that by July they are in this ago. You remember on Twitter? when the president started sharing food and things like that, all right? Okay, so by June, okay, everybody put up your hand, and then those of you who by June had made up their mind or hadn't, no, by June, those of you who had made up your mind to vote by June, lift up your hand. By June, those who had made up, okay, three of you. Okay, so by November, December, how many of you had then made up your mind by November, December? Okay, so with this calculation, I mean, with those of you who have actually lifted up your hand, can we then say the campaign had impact on your decision, progressive decision to vote?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
So
a campaign has a progressive influence on us to vote, because in the first place, during the beginning of the year, if you asked whether I will vote, I would be a bit skeptical as in whether I will vote or not, because I'll be comparing that the existing government, what has he done that I will vote for him, knowing that I have already experienced what happened in the previous government. So I want to see something new. And so if that something new isn't there from the existing government, I don't think I would like to vote. So in June, where we saw that Akufo-Addo was doing so much in the press briefing about the COVID-19 and all that, telling us what to do, sharing food, and even look at what happened in Nigeria. Some Nigerians were saying that we are blessed with our president, the way our president care for us. Every week he's talking to us about how to protect ourselves, about this COVID, even eating dawa and those things. Like really, a president will tell his citizens to do this. You see, it was kind of informing our decisions as to who to vote for. Even looking at the free SHS, to the extent that some West African countries didn't allow their people to write BC and WASI, but yes, Ghana was able to maneuver its way through during the COVID to put out strict measures for people to write this BC and all that. So it was kind of progressively informing our decision as to who to vote for and all that.
Okay. So Gifty says, I thought I might not, but I did. Gilbert says, I made my mind not to vote and I didn't vote. Gifty says, I changed my mind and I voted. Sophia says, yes, sir. It means there was a progressive, effect. Then Gilbert says, the campaign didn't change my mind at all, no matter what they campaigned or projected. Okay, so Anas, quick one.
Me, I didn't want to vote. I didn't want to, because I realized that both parties are all the same. They come with false propagandas. When we vote for them, they do nothing. So I was there, and then I heard this Akufo-Addo's. I was watching some documentary on UTV where people from the villages have been helped because of ESHS. I was like, okay, fine. Let me go for him, for this man. And then while we were there, I changed my mind to vote for NDC. And then NDC took with this Okada policy, and I got angry. I was like, nah, but I'm voting for no one. The Okada thing spoiled the whole thing, because if you see the dead cases and then the injuries that come with only for motorcycles, so you'll be surprised. So Mahama knows this, and then he still wants to legalize such things. I'm like, no.
Okay,
I won't vote for anybody.
So Anas changed her mind 3 times, all right?
Yes, 3 times.
From I'm not voting to watching documentary on free SHS and thinking, okay, I'll vote, and then changing your mind to vote NDC, and then Okada mentioning, and then it changed your mind again. In fact, about 4 times, yeah, you change your mind. Okay, now Herman said, I did change my mind the day of the election itself. Wow, that's the lastminute.com. Okay, so okay, Julius, you want to say something final?
Yes, Doc, please. So also starting from, I think, January 2020, I made up my mind not to vote, but getting to the election time, I decided to vote for the MPP, because I thought of free education and how my siblings are going to benefit. But then when I mean, getting very, very, very close, the NDC brought this Fanina policy for tertiary students. So I was like, it's a funny in idea. I'm going to what that. So quickly I switched. I decided to vote for the NDC, but unfortunately on 7th December I couldn't vote because I was very tight. Yeah, so that was it.
But so you see, now at one breath we can think that, or we may think that campaigns do not have effect. They only entrench our beliefs. But on one other breath, we can see that campaigns actually have an effect, all right? Because sometimes you ask yourself whether, it is the campaign or it is your own belief that has actually caused you to do it. But there is a subtle effect that campaigns, have that sometimes we may not detect. I personally don't think that campaigns do not have effect. I think campaigns have effect. I can appreciate the idea that sometimes campaigns, kind of reinforces our original, beliefs. But certainly there are some times the campaign even make us question our original beliefs, all right? That you would actually think, oh, I belong to this party, I want to vote for this party. And then another party, through their communication or campaign actually makes you question whether you have taken the right decisions. And I remember some people who were sending messages and asking, what are other people thinking of voting? So people also want to, bandwagon effect, want to align themselves with other people. And you see, from what Julius said, you were using, you're a human being, you belong to so many parts, all right? You belong to a family, you belong to a church, you belong to a community, etc. From the beginning, you are considering voting based on your siblings' perspectives, isn't it? The idea that a certain policy was making it possible for your citizens, for your siblings to have education. And then somebody comes and gives you a direct benefit, Fanihina, then you go, oh, this one there is affect me direct too. Now let me leave my citizens policy, my siblings one, and think about myself. So it's about how does a political party speak to you in their policy positions. Are you benefiting directly, or your community benefiting directly, or your society? But all those things are effects that the campaign has on us. Anas, your hand is still up. Anas, your hand is still up. On mute.
Sorry. Sorry.
It's the old one. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So let's finalize it because our time is even up. The campaign effect, of course, they have Leatherfields and Co. have actually, cast out on it. They say, observe that those who decide early on who to vote benefit from the reinforcing effect of the campaign discourse, as political communication serves the important purpose of, preserving prior decisions. It kept the partisans in line by reassuring them, and then it reduces defections from the ranks. Yes, there are, effects. And even if you have to reinforce your predispositions, I think it's an effect, because sometimes you're thinking, oh, are you right in voting this particular candidate? And then the campaign comes on to reinforce that. All right. So Sister, sir, please, I have some questions. One, is there an ethical code that guides campaigning? People say all sorts of things and get personal attacks instead of focusing on issues. Also, in a country that has
Campaign is not a
and there were
professional.
almost every time on radio is there. Okay, so the question is that it's supposed to be self-censorship, all right? And I particularly criticized, the EC for becoming only an election or a voting institution. The EC had completely abandoned the campaign part of their job. The EC is like the regulator of elections, all right? They're supposed to regulate the entire electioneering process, including posters. As we speak now, there are quite a lot of posters in town, political posters in town, isn't it? You see the billboards, etc. It is the EC's job to actually prescribe when political posters must be and when they must not be. They should prescribe within what time frame must political parties remove their posters in town to keep the city clean. Now we have a lot of political posters littered across, all right? Because EC doesn't care. The EC was supposed to prescribe how political parties were supposed to campaign because of COVID-19. Obviously, we saw a lot of institutions coming out with protocols how to engage them. The banks came out with protocols how to engage them during COVID-19, all right? The hospitals had protocols. The telcos had protocols on how to engage them. Ask yourself whether the EC put out any protocol on how political parties were supposed to campaign in the midst of COVID-19. They didn't, because they don't care. They only registration EC. It's only about registration, registration, registration. Meanwhile, the entire campaign comes under the ambit of the EC. So your question is right. There are supposed to be code of conduct. And that code of conduct development is supposed to come from the EC, but our EC is highly incompetent, to actually prescribe some of these things. And that's the kind of problem that I have chastised them several. I've criticized them a number of times on radio stations, because I think that they are only EC for the vote. They are not EC for the entire political system. Even when it comes to fundraising, they're supposed to come out with code of practice of how to source funds in the fit, proper person checks. Where are you getting the money from? The EC doesn't do any of